I am thrilled to bring our next storyteller up here. She is also a Beaconite. Angela Helland lives here with her family, and she is a gardener, an animal hoarder, and a dancer in a former life. Please welcome Angela Helland.
So there's a lot more people here than I had anticipated. I just want you to know. I thought it was going to be like an intimate thing. All right, so in the fall of 2009, I was living in Brooklyn with my husband, Nate, and my young son, Oscar, and we were expecting our second child. And some of you in this room may know that the second time around, it is just vastly different than the first. You're probably exhausted. If you have a little one, you're running around after the little one. You don't have time to luxuriate in wondering, what did I grow today? Like, how many toes? And you are probably eating scraps off of your kid's high chair, You're probably distracted, is what I'm saying. And I was definitely distracted, but my distraction was probably a little bit heavier than most. My son, Oscar, he had just turned 2 in October that fall. And around 2 is a time of big milestones, big leaps in speech development and interaction. And my son, he actually had a huge vocabulary at that age, but Nate and I started to notice that there was some atypical speech patterns. I'll give you an example. I would ask Oscar if he wanted some juice. I'd say, Oscar, do you want some juice? And he would say, do you want some juice? And I'd say, no, Oscar, do you want some juice? And he would say, do you want some juice? Which was confusing and frustrating, and something didn't feel right. So we went to the pediatrician and left the office with a referral to early intervention. And that kicked off a whole slew of specialists and therapists and teachers coming to our apartment and caseworkers and paperwork for me to sign. And worst of all, it was me falling down a Google research rabbit hole of, what the fuck is going on with my kid and how can I fix this problem? Because that's what a good mom would do, right? She'd fix it. And it felt very lonely. And all the while that I was doing this, staying up late at night, eyes glazed over on the screen. Oh, if I just do this, if I just get this therapist, if I just read these books, it will all be better and I won't be so afraid. I was getting bigger and bigger. My due date was actually December 31st, New Year's Eve. And the fall had passed, winter was upon me, and the holidays passed, and I was so consumed with worry and anxiety and fear about what was happening with my son that I was really distracted from my pregnancy. And I have to tell you, I was enormous with this baby. It was kind of crazy how powerful denial is, right? Because with my second, I grew straight out. Like, if you were behind me, you wouldn't know that I was pregnant. But if I turned to the side, it looked like I'd swallowed a 5-year-old child. Like, it was like so huge. And so at a certain point, I realized, I looked at the calendar, and I was like, my God, I'm due in a week. I have to get my shit together. And the due date came, and the due date went. And then another week passed. And then another week passed. So I was 42 weeks. And I just told you how enormous I was. Like, I'd gotten bigger. Like, it was so uncomfortable and so painful, and I felt that I was so ready to have this baby. So I had tried all the things. I know everybody here has probably got like a thing, like, oh, if you just took those herbs or did this exercise or whatever. I tried all the things. I had the nasty herbs. Didn't work. I went up and down the staircase in my apartment building, up and down. Didn't work. I had sex, 41 weeks, which is not as hot as it sounds. Didn't work. And I called my midwife. So 42 weeks, calling her in a panic, crying. And she was like, okay, calm down. Okay. I have a good friend. She's an acupuncturist. She lives a few blocks from you. You're going to go. You're going to see her. She's going to take care of you. So I bundled up. I went to this office. It was late in the day, and the sun had set, and I knocked on the door, and this woman answered the door, and she was tiny. She looked like she was backlit, so she was just this like angelic sort of vibe, and she looked like a cross between the Virgin Mary and that super wise owl in the Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pops. Huge eyes. She was perfect. And so she brought me into her office and just had this very calm way about her. And I started telling her my story, and she could see. I think she just scanned me, and I was like, my God, this woman is like panicking. And she sat me down. She said, okay, listen, I'm going to leave here for a few minutes. And I want you, while I'm gone, to think about if there's anything that you're holding on to. And she left, and she shut the door. And my first thought was like, that fucking bitch. Like, I came here in a moment of need, and like, I want the needles, I want the smudging, I want the smoke, whatever it takes. Get this baby out. But I realized in the few minutes that had passed and she left that it was the first time I was really alone with my baby and my thoughts. Life had been so chaotic and so full of my worries that there I was, realizing that this was the first time in a while, maybe ever. And I thought about what she asked me. Was I holding on to anything? And the truth is, I really was. First, I was terrified to have this baby physically. My son was born via C-section, emergency C-section, and they told me at the time that I was too small to have had an 8.5-pound baby, which I was very skeptical of at the time, but I let it pass because I felt so bad about myself. So I was scared. I was like, I don't know if I can actually do this. This baby's obviously huge, And then I was also very scared for my marriage because, to be honest with you, we barely survived our first, and I didn't know what having another one, adding more chaos into the mix, was going to do to us. But mostly, I was terrified that I was the wrong person for this soul because I didn't know if I was up to the task of raising my son, who I knew at that point had developmental delays. And I thought maybe there had been a big mistake. Like, he had come to me, the universe gave him to me, and something got mixed up in the channels, and I wasn't the right mother because I wasn't smart enough for this. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't patient enough. I wasn't all the things. And I didn't know if I could be for this baby as well. And once I realized that I'd been holding on to all of those things, I took a really deep breath, and I knew that I had to talk to my baby. So I put my hands on my gigantic belly, and I said, I'm so sorry, baby, because I've been holding you close. I haven't wanted you to come out, actually. I didn't know if I could do this. And now I don't know still, but I'm ready. I'm ready for you. Please come out. And my face was soaked with tears, and the acupuncturist walked back in, and she saw me, and she gave me a little hug and squeezed my hand and said, listen, if you're still pregnant in the morning, call me. We'll do a treatment, but here's my card. And she gave me one more hug, sent me out the door, and I made it a block and a half before I felt my first contraction. It was this surge of everything kind of tightening and this pain and things gathering in my body, and it was the most beautiful feeling I'd felt in a long time, because I knew that my baby was making her way into the world. And I went home and I called Nate and I called my midwife, and by the next morning I had her all 10 pounds. And yes, it's true. And 9 years later, both my kids are very loving and quirky, and they're thriving and they're happy. And I can tell you with certainty that the universe did not make any mistakes. They are exactly where they need to be, and I'm so happy. Thank you so much.